3 days after giving birth, Adam told me he had to leave for an urgent business trip, leaving me alone to care for our newborn. I watched him walk out the door, feeling a heaviness settle over me. Later that evening, trying to distract myself, I opened social media. My breath caught in my chest. There it was, a photo of Adam, not with us, but with another family. The caption read, "On vacation. A happy family of 3." My hands shook as I tapped out a simple question mark in the comments. Moments later, my phone rang. Adam's voice came through sharp and cold. He scolded me, saying I didn't understand how hard it was for her, how she was a single mother with no man to support her. "It was just a photo," he snapped. "Why are you being so cruel?" That night, my childhood friend Ella posted another picture. It showed an extravagant cash gift. The caption read, "He insisted on giving me this after our family photo." I knew then that Adam had given her money to keep her calm. Something inside me broke. I finally admitted it to myself. It was time to let him go. As if sensing the storm inside me, my baby began to cry. I held him close, singing lullabies through my tears for what felt like hours until he finally fell asleep. But Adam never called. Not to explain. Not to apologize. Meanwhile, Ella's social media lit up with updates. She posted 3 more photos flaunting outrageous gifts. The comment section exploded with envy and admiration. And then, I saw it. Adam's comment. "I got you all of these today, just for you. In 20 years, I'll do the same for our daughter. You're amazing. I love you." The words cut through me like a knife. I turned to look at my son, peacefully asleep in his crib. Adam had forgotten about our baby. His own son, just 6 days old. The memories hit me all at once. The day our son was born, Adam had told me he was too busy with work to be there. Later, I found out the truth. He hadn't missed the birth because of work. He had missed it to celebrate Ella's 3-year-old daughter's birthday. I could still hear the doctor's voice from my latest appointment. "The gallstones are too large. We can't delay the surgery any longer. I recommend operating tomorrow." I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. I'd known about the gallstones during my pregnancy, but hearing that it had worsened still took my breath away. After a long pause, I picked up my phone and sent Adam a message. "Come home. I need to talk to you, it's urgent." Hours passed before I got a reply. When it came, it was blunt and dismissive. "I'm busy. Don't call me over something trivial. If you keep this up, I'll file for divorce." I stared at the screen in silence. Since Ella entered his life, I'd lost count of how many times Adam had threatened divorce. They were always together, inseparable. Every time I saw them, it felt like a dagger to the heart. And then came his final blow. "Marriage always treats women unfairly," he wrote. "If you can't handle me being close to Ella, maybe you should be the one to leave." For years, I'd been the one to back down, to apologize, even when I'd done nothing wrong. But not this time. I typed back, steady and calm. "The reason I asked you to come home is because I'm having surgery. But if you've already made your decision, fine. Let's get a divorce. Why didn't you tell me you weren't feeling well? What time is your surgery tomorrow? I'll come home and be with you." I furrowed my brow as I watched our baby sleep peacefully. "Tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. But the next morning, Adam's phone was off. I felt a sharp pain radiating from my side, my face pale from the intensity of it. I was too weak to handle the hospital admission alone, so I had to call a friend for help, which made me feel incredibly sad. The surgery ended late that evening. The doctor instructed me to rest for several days, but not once did Adam call. During that time, Ella kept flaunting their romantic moments on social media. I twisted my ankle slightly, and he turned pale and rushed me to the emergency room, she wrote. He even canceled his return flight home just to stay with me. It was only a mild sprain, but he wouldn't let me walk and carried me everywhere. I clicked on the picture of Adam carrying her on his back. A memory flashed through my mind. My 4-month pregnancy checkup. I suddenly recalled how my hip had started aching so badly that every step was agonizing. The doctor had diagnosed it as hip synovitis and advised me to avoid too much movement and keep the area warm. I had called Adam back then, asking him to pick me up. His response had been filled with impatience and frustration. I'm a busy man. My time is for work, not for wasting on you. It's just pregnancy. You're being dramatic. If you can't walk, you should probably just check yourself into the hospital. Back in the present, I picked up my phone again and sent him another message. Adam, I need you to seriously think about me and our son. He replied almost immediately. I'm on a business trip overseas. I was going to come home soon, but Ella sprained her ankle, and I had to take her to the ER. I can't leave her alone. She's going through a really lonely time right now. I'm trying to make money for our son's education, and all you do is nag every day. I remembered the stack of cash Adam had flaunted in the comments section. I took a deep breath and asked him what had been simmering in my heart. Adam, you're not really worried about our son's education, are you? You're only concerned about Ella's daughter. His response was fast and angry, like a whip cracking. What are you saying? How dare you, as my wife, question me like that? I kept my voice calm, though my chest felt like it might shatter. I have one last request. On the day our son was born, you said work was more important and didn't come. When I had my surgery, you said the same thing and stayed away. You didn't even come to visit me at the hospital. But when Ella twisted her ankle, you dropped everything and ran to her. Adam, I've been patient throughout our entire marriage. But I've reached my limit. Please sign the divorce papers and send them back to me. I'll raise our son, and you can live your life with Ella. Then I paused, making sure he'd hear every word of my final condition. I only ask for one thing. I want full custody of my son. And my fair share of the assets. Adam replied immediately. I have something urgent I need to deal with today. Please don't do anything drastic. I'll be home tomorrow. But tomorrow came and went, and Adam never showed up. Even after the doctor discharged me, he didn't come. I sat in the car, staring out the window as the buildings blurred past. Memories began to unfold like pages of a worn book. I met Adam when we were in college. I fell in love with him. During our first year of marriage, Adam started his first business. He was so hopeful. But then, a so-called friend tricked him into a fraudulent deal, and Adam was buried under a mountain of debt. I wanted to help him, so I took on 3 jobs just to make ends meet. During the day, I worked. At night, I took care of the house and made sure there was dinner waiting for him. That was our life until his second business finally found success. I thought we had finally reached the happiness we had dreamed of. But everything changed a year ago. It was the day I found out about his affair with Ella. I still remember coming home and finding Adam there shortly after me. He didn't wake me right away. Instead, he stood by the table, staring at the medical report from my surgery. You had the surgery without me? Why didn't you wait until I came back? He asked. During my 3 days in the hospital, I hadn't slept much at all. The first real sleep I had managed to get was interrupted by his voice. I was beyond exhausted. Mentally, physically, emotionally. I looked at him and asked, Adam, do you really believe I should have waited, even as my condition worsened, just so you could be there? For a moment, he looked stunned. Then, his expression softened ever so slightly as he finally answered. Fine, Adam said, his voice dripping with condescension, I'll let it go this time. Hurry up and iron my suit. I have somewhere important to be. The room seemed to hold its breath. I stood frozen, disbelief wrapping around me like a cold, suffocating fog. He hadn't come home for me. Not to comfort me after the ordeal of surgery. He'd come home to prepare for a meeting. Before I could process the sting of betrayal, my phone buzzed. A soft but insistent reminder that it was time to feed the baby. I pushed past the ache in my limbs and forced myself to stand, every step feeling like I was moving through water. I reached for the bottle and began to prepare it with trembling hands. Behind me, Adam's temper detonated like a thunderclap. The chair next to him scraped violently as he kicked it away. I should have never married you, he snarled, his eyes blazing. I regret everything. And just like that, he was gone, the door slamming shut with enough force to rattle the windows. The baby's startled cries pierced the silence, fragile and raw. I swallowed the knot in my throat and focused on soothing my son, holding him close and whispering soft reassurances until his cries melted into soft, steady breaths. It took 30 agonizing minutes before he drifted back to sleep. Once he did, I reached for my phone with shaky fingers and typed the words that had been forming in my heart for too long. Can you recommend a divorce attorney? The reply came almost instantly, a digital echo of disbelief. Are you serious? Today's your birthday. Why now? The irony was suffocating. My birthday, a day that should have felt like warmth and celebration, was instead the day I finally admitted defeat. The next morning, Adam returned. His sudden appearance was like a dark cloud rolling in after a fleeting glimpse of sunlight. His eyes, once a shade of blue that had seemed limitless, now looked sharp, cold, and accusatory. Why didn't you tell me yesterday was your birthday? He asked, his voice low but charged with blame. I met his gaze with the hollow exhaustion of someone who had nothing left to explain. Without waiting for an answer, he pulled out a small velvet box and placed it in front of me. Look. I got you something special. Inside was a thin gold necklace, so delicate it looked like it might snap at the slightest tug. I couldn't help but compare it to the dazzling, weighty jewelry he had once gifted Ella. That necklace had sparkled with excess, dripping with promises. It felt like an apology whispered too softly to be heard. I didn't need anyone to tell me what this meant. Love isn't always in words, it's in gestures, in what they choose to give or withhold. He held it out toward me, his tone laced with impatience. Put it on. We'll celebrate later. A cold resolve settled in my chest. I met his gaze without flinching. I don't need it. His expression twisted from surprise to fury, like a storm rolling in without warning. His voice rose, thick with indignation. I went out of my way to make you feel better, and this is how you react? What do you want from me? What is this tantrum? I squared my shoulders, my voice quiet but unyielding. I'm not throwing a tantrum. The necklace slipped from his fingers and fell to the floor with a soft clink. He stomped on it, grinding it beneath his heel until the fragile chain lay broken, twisted. His chest heaved as he spat out his next words. You're angry about that family photo, aren't you? The one with Ella and her daughter? Her daughter's teacher asked for a family photo for class. That's the only reason I did it. He let out a long, self-satisfied sigh, as though that flimsy excuse could absolve him. And those gifts? I gave them to her because you made her upset. I never asked you to apologize to her. The sheer absurdity of it all wrapped around me like a heavy cloak. I felt the weight of exhaustion settles deeper into my bones, but beneath it, there was something else. A quiet, simmering resolve. "You're right, Adam," I murmured, though my words were hollow and laced with resignation. A chime from my phone broke the silence. It was an email from work. Confirmation that my resignation had been accepted. I closed the email and booked a flight. 5 days from now, I will leave this house and never look back. I sent another message to my attorney. This time, I wasn't asking. I was ready to fight for full custody of my son. With that, I headed to the bedroom. There were no tears left to cry, no final arguments to have. I just wanted rest, a deep, dreamless sleep where even the pain couldn't follow. But Adam's voice shattered the quiet like glass hitting the floor. "I'm talking to you. Where do you think you're going?" "I'm going to bed," I said calmly, holding his gaze with quiet finality. Adam's face twisted with frustration, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me falter. I turned and walked toward the bedroom, feeling the weight of each step, as though gravity had doubled. The moment I closed the door behind me, a loud crash echoed from the living room, a violent, jarring sound that shattered the fragile silence. I didn't need to look to know that Adam's rage had exploded again. Still, I didn't stop. The chaos behind that door felt distant, like the closing scene of a story that was no longer mine. My mind was clear, my resolve like steel. The preparations for the divorce proceeded exactly as planned. I packed my things methodically, each item folded and placed in my bag with the care of someone closing a chapter of their life. 3 days later, just as I zipped up the last suitcase, my phone rang. Adam's name flashed on the screen, a name that once brought butterflies to my stomach, but now only weighed like a stone in my hand. His voice crackled through the line, familiar and infuriating. "Casey, I'm at the open-air bar on the beach. Come. Now." The thought of the beach, the endless wind, the shifting sands, felt like a cruel invitation. I was still recovering, my body fragile, my heart a battlefield of healing wounds. I almost refused. I wanted to refuse. But the phone rang again. And again. Reluctantly, I threw on layers to brace against the wind and made my way there, each step filled with reluctant dread. When I arrived, the salty air wrapped around me like a cold reminder of everything I had lost. My eyes locked on the scene before me, Adam at the bar, beer in hand, his posture relaxed in a way that made my blood boil. Next to him, like a cat with sharp claws hidden beneath soft fur, was Ella. She was leaning into him, her hand brushing against his arm in that calculated way that women use when they know they've won. I walked toward them, my footsteps slow, deliberate. But halfway there, my legs stopped of their own accord. Adam, as though emboldened by the setting sun and the alcohol in his veins, turned to her and raised his voice for everyone to hear. "I'm done letting her ruin our lives," he said. The words carried across the open air, as sharp as a slap. It took less than 5 minutes to walk from the car to the bar, but in that short time, something inside me shifted. Something awoke. And it wasn't a weakness. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, my fingers steady as I typed a message to my attorney. "Let me know when the divorce papers are finalized. It's time to close this story." Ella and Adam sat close together, their heads nearly touching as though they shared a world I could never enter. Their friends watched the scene unfold with cruel fascination, their laughter like jagged shards of glass. One of them snickered, loud enough for me to hear. So, Ella wasn't lying. Adam's mistress really is bigger than we expected. The comment landed like a punch to the gut, but I kept my head high. Ella took a slow sip of her red wine, her lips curling as she glanced at me. Her voice was syrupy sweet but laced with venom. Sorry about this, she said. I lost a game of truth or dare. My choices were to kiss the lead singer of the band or to call you out here. Adam doesn't let me kiss other men, so here you are. You can leave now, if you want. Her apology was a mockery, an insult wrapped in false politeness. I could hear the smugness dripping from every word. My eyes shifted to Adam. He wasn't looking at me, he couldn't. He stared at the table, his jaw tight, his silence as damning as any confession. I furrowed my brow, my heart aching with the finality of it all. This was the man I had once fought for, sacrificed for. Now, he sat there, refusing to defend me, refusing to acknowledge the cruelty playing out before him. And in that moment, I knew. This was no longer love, it was war, and I was done losing. The moment my anger surged and words burned on the tip of my tongue, Ella tilted her head in that infuriatingly smug way, flaunting a pure gold necklace that gleamed under the bar's lights. She wanted me to see it. Wanted me to feel small. A taunt wrapped in gold and arrogance. Before I could stop myself, my body moved on instinct, fueled by betrayal and a rage that pulsed in every vein. I strode forward and grabbed the necklace, yanking it from her neck in one swift, unrelenting pull. The chain snapped with a sharp metallic sound, and the pendant dangled in my hand like a symbol of everything stolen from me. What the hell are you doing, you fat cow? Ella shrieked, her face contorted with fury as she reached to snatch the necklace back. But I was faster. I stuffed the necklace into my bag and fixed her with a glare sharp enough to cut through stone. This necklace, I said, my voice like steel, was bought with marital assets. Our assets. I have every right to take it back. I remembered my conversation with the lawyer. Everything bought during the marriage could be reclaimed. Even the luxuries Adam had showered on Ella like bribes of affection. Ella's expression darkened, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. Her voice dropped, low and dangerous. Stealing in broad daylight? You realize that's a crime, right? Shall I call the police? I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. Fear had no room in my heart anymore, it had been burned away by something much stronger. Adam stepped forward, his brow furrowed as he snatched the phone from Ella's hand before she could follow through on her threat. Enough, he snapped, the tension in his voice betraying his panic. Don't make a scene. Just go home. For a moment, his eyes met mine, and there was something there. Concern? Guilt? Whatever it was, it sank like a stone in my stomach because I knew it was too little, too late. Around us, his friends began to murmur, their curiosity morphing into cruel whispers. I heard one of them mutter, "What's going on? Who's the real mistress here?" Ella's face flushed a deep crimson, her anger and embarrassment twisting her features. She turned to Adam, her eyes wide and pleading, like a wounded animal searching for reassurance. You told me, she said, her voice trembling yet sharp, that the unwanted person in a relationship is the outsider, the one who doesn't belong. So tell them. Tell them that Casey is the mistress, tell them I'm your real wife. Adam hesitated, his confidence cracking under the weight of the eyes on him. Then, as if desperate to regain control, he cupped Ella's face and wiped away her theatrical tears with his thumb. He turned to the crowd and declared, "Enough of the rumors. Ella is my wife. I love her." The crowd erupted in cheers and taunts. "Adam, kiss her," someone shouted, and without hesitation, Adam pulled Ella close and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was meant to silence the world. But it didn't. Because Ella's eyes fluttered open mid-kiss, and she looked straight at me, a triumphant, mocking smirk tugging at her lips. My blood ran cold as her gaze seemed to say, "See? It doesn't matter if your name is on the marriage certificate. I own his heart, his wealth, his body, everything. The walls of my composure crumbled. The next thing I knew, my hand flew up, and my palm cracked against her cheek with a sound that cut through the bar's noise. Ella staggered, clutching her cheek as tears welled in her eyes, not from pain but from indignity. She hit me. Ella gasped, her voice pitiful and dramatic. Adam's face darkened instantly. Without a second's hesitation, he drove his foot into my stomach. I doubled over as searing pain ripped through me, and I felt the familiar, terrifying sensation of my C-section scar tearing open. I collapsed onto the floor, the cold tiles biting into my skin as warmth. Hot, sticky, and terrifying. Spread beneath me. Adam knelt down and grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. His voice was ice cold, devoid of humanity. Stand up and apologize to Ella. Tears blurred my vision, but not from fear. No, from rage so fierce I could taste the copper tang of blood as I bit my lip to keep from screaming. I will never, I growled, my voice hoarse but unbroken, apologize to her. Adam's response was another savage kick to my abdomen. Pain bloomed, sharp and all-consuming, until the world began to dim around the edges. Is this how you want things to end? He spat. You defy me at every turn, stir up trouble, and refuse to obey. So this is what you get. Each blow felt like a storm breaking me apart, my dress soaking through with the deep crimson of betrayal and brutality. My body curled in on itself, trembling from the sheer force of agony. Still, somewhere beneath the pain, there was a flicker of defiance that refused to be extinguished. I forced my head up, my breath shallow but steady enough to form the words that would end this nightmare. Adam, let's get a divorce. His eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw something like fear flicker there. His lips parted as if he wanted to say something, but I never heard the words. And only silence remained. I awoke from the darkness. The weight of my body felt crushing, my limbs heavy as iron. I blinked against the harsh white light overhead until the blurred edges sharpened into the face of a nurse. Casey, she said softly, professionally. Can you hear me? I tried to speak, but my throat was parched and raw. All I could manage was a faint nod. Memories clawed their way to the surface. The humiliation, the pain, Adam's cruelty. My chest tightened. A quiet, unbreakable truth. I had survived. The nurse's voice was calm, but her words cut through me. It's a good thing you were brought in when you were. The wound reopened, and you lost a significant amount of blood. You need to rest and avoid any strain on your body. The doctor says there's no threat to your life. A good thing. If this was good fortune, I never wanted to experience misfortune. I felt like a shattered vase, glued back together just well enough to hold its shape, but fragile enough that the slightest touch could send it breaking again. I didn't ask who had taken me to the hospital. I didn't care. I knew it wasn't Adam. He wasn't capable of that, not anymore. I'd become a shadow to him, an inconvenience, something discarded without a second thought. I closed my eyes, willing the cold, sterile scent of antiseptic to fade as I drifted somewhere deeper within myself. And that's when it happened, a flicker in the darkness. Not quite a thought, more like a whisper of something I'd buried long ago, the will to fight. The next morning, I was discharged. The nurse suggested I call someone to pick me up, her eyes soft with pity I didn't want. I shook my head. I couldn't bear the thought of someone's kind words brushing over wounds that hadn't even begun to close. I just wanted to go home. To hold my son. As I stepped into the house, silence greeted me. But it was not a peaceful or comforting silence, it was a cold one. I set my suitcase near the door and walked instinctively toward the nursery. There was my beloved son. A sob welled up in my throat, but I swallowed it down. The sight of him was an anchor in a storm-tossed sea, holding me steady when I could have drowned. That night, the faint light in the living room enveloped my weary self. But there was no comfort in its shadows, only memories that played out in my mind like scenes from a tragedy I'd lived too many times. Each detail sharpened, stabbing at my heart. But something was different this time. I didn't pity myself. I felt anger, a deep, blistering anger that burned away the last remnants of fear. Adam had stolen so much from me. My time, my health, my love, and my dignity. But not anymore. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. I stared at the screen, the message forming in my heart before my fingers typed the words. Heather, can we talk? I need you. The response came almost instantly. Of course. Tell me where you are. I'll be there right away. Next morning, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there she was. Heather. Her hair was immaculate, a crown of soft waves framing her sharp, confident features. She looked exactly as I remembered, fierce, poised, unwavering. Adam had always insisted she was a bad influence, claiming she was pulling me away from him with her independence, her refusal to conform to the life I'd been molded into. He'd done everything in his power to drive her away. But there she stood, and as our eyes met, a wave of relief so profound it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. I let her inside, and she set her bag down on the sofa with an ease that felt like a declaration. I'm here now. You're not alone. I've been worried since I got your message. What happened? She asked, her voice steady, calm beneath the concern that kept my heart from unraveling. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself for the actions I was about to take. And then I told her everything. Every jagged truth about Adam and Ella. The humiliation, the betrayal, the bruises invisible to the world but sharp and real inside me. The weight lifted, and I could breathe again. Heather didn't interrupt, not once. But as I finished speaking, her eyes were ablaze, reflecting all the anger I had kept hidden. She leaned forward, her voice low and resolute. Casey, you can't go on like this. Do you want to leave him? For good. I nodded, though my hands trembled under the pressure of carrying the weight of what was about to happen. It wasn't just fear. It was the knowledge of who Adam was. A man who wrapped cruelty in charm and wielded power with precision. Yes, I whispered. But it's not just about leaving. I want it all back. Everything he took from me. I want him to feel it. Heather's lips curved, not into a smile of sympathy, but something stronger, fiercer, a vow. Then you're ready to fight, she said, her voice like a steady drumbeat. And believe me, Casey, I know exactly where to start. Heather's voice, calm yet razor-sharp, pierced through my haze of anger and exhaustion. As she spoke, my chest tightened, and my eyes widened with disbelief at what I was hearing. Adam, the man who lorded his brilliance over me, wasn't as brilliant as he wanted the world to believe. There had always been cracks in the facade, moments I dismissed as paranoia or self-doubt. Now, Heather was confirming it all. The rumors claimed that some of his recent victories weren't his own at all. And Ella, Ella, hadn't just been a distraction. She'd been a dagger poised at Adam's back, selling his company's most guarded secrets to his competitors. The woman he sacrificed everything for was the one engineering his downfall. It was almost poetic, wasn't it? I felt like 1,000 tiny puzzle pieces that had been floating aimlessly for years had suddenly snapped together, forming a cruel, inevitable picture. I forced myself to breathe, though my heart was pounding as if it might burst. What do I do now? I whispered, though it came out more like a plea than a question. Heather leaned back, a victorious smirk playing on her lips. You do what he'd never expect. You become the nightmare he never thought you could be. Her words stirred a feeling within me that I had never felt before. I wasn't sure if the heat in my chest was fear or fury, but I knew there was no turning back. For my son. For myself. For the pieces of me that Adam had broken and scattered. I hardly slept that night. The weight of plans, memories, and old wounds pressed into my mind. The sacrifices I had made flashed through my mind. Late-night work shifts, mornings that began in utter exhaustion, and the dreams I buried for the sake of his ambitions. And the repeated, never-ending humiliations. I had built a life for him that he could boast about to others. Every ounce of love, time, and strength I had poured into him, Ella was now sipping like stolen champagne. The next morning, Heather arrived early, as composed as ever. She held a leather bag filled with documents. We sat at the dining table, where she laid out spreadsheets, legal documents, and printed emails that looked like weapons in paper form. These are his contracts with one of his biggest clients, she said, tapping the top of a document. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but there was an edge to it. They're under review because of suspected fraud. If this deal falls apart, Adam's company loses almost everything. I stared at the papers, trying to absorb what I was seeing. I couldn't tell if I was terrified or excited. And Ella? I asked, my voice more steady than I felt. Heather's eyes sparkled. She's at the center of it all. She's been leaking confidential data to Adam's competitors. The same ones who've been circling his company like vultures. And the irony? Adam doesn't have a clue. The person he trusts most is the one gutting his empire from the inside. The absurdity of it all bubbled up in my throat. I almost laughed, though there was no humor in it. Adam had set fire to my life for a woman who was now holding a torch to his. How do we use this? I asked, leaning in as though proximity to the truth might steady me. Heather's smile grew sharper, and for a moment, I felt fear. First, we need irrefutable proof. And I know someone who can get it. After that, we prepare. But we do it on his terms. Adam never saw you as a threat, Casey. That's his fatal mistake. The days that followed became a dance between two lives. By day, I was a mother, tending to my son with quiet strength, pretending that everything was normal. By night, I was a strategist, combing through every detail Heather gathered, piecing together the story that would unravel Adam. Messages, bank transactions, meetings, all threads led to the pursuit of betrayal and truth. Somewhere in the midst of it all, I realized something that brought both sorrow and pride. I was no longer the version of Casey who whispered apologies and begged for scraps of affection. I was someone new. Someone ready to fight, not just for justice, but for the dignity I had let slip through my fingers for too long. One afternoon, as sunlight poured into the dining room, Heather's phone rang. I watched her as she listened, her features shifting into something fierce and triumphant. It's our contact, she said, stepping away. When she returned, she was practically glowing with victory. Casey, she said, her voice thick with excitement, we have what we need. There's proof, enough to burn Ella's empire to the ground. She's been siphoning money from Adam's accounts. My heartbeat pounded like a war drum. The image of Ella's smug face flickered in my mind, but this time I didn't feel powerless. For the first time, I felt the full weight of power settle into my hands. What's our next move? I asked, meeting Heather's gaze with steady resolve. Heather leaned forward, her eyes lit with a fire that matched my own. We expose her. But not in some quiet way. We make sure Adam finds out in front of everyone, where there's nowhere to hide. The plan unfolded quickly, sharp and precise. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the worst. I was preparing for the inevitable reckoning. The perfect stage had to be set, one where Adam couldn't run from the truth, where every spotlight would pierce the lies he'd woven. That place revealed itself in the form of the annual charity gala hosted by his company. I knew those events well. They were Adam's personal theater, where he paraded his perfect life before clients and partners, wearing his charm like a polished mask. That evening, I prepared like never before. I swept my hair into an elegant chignon and slipped into a sleek black dress that exuded quiet power. Before I left, I leaned over my sleeping son, brushing my fingers against his soft cheek. "This is for you," I whispered and kissed his forehead. Heather waited in the car, her eyes gleaming with shared purpose. On the drive to the venue, anticipation twisted and coiled within me, a potent blend of nerves and resolve. Everything we'd planned came down to this night. When we arrived, the hall glittered like a sky full of stars. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, and soft music hummed through the air. The room swelled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the quiet buzz of expensive conversations. And there he was, Adam, at the center of it all, surrounded by admirers, laughing as though his life was untouchable. But his laughter was borrowed time, and soon, the bill would come due. The night wore on until Heather gave me the signal, a subtle nod from across the room. The moment had come. I stepped forward, each footfall deliberate, unhurried. Adam's head turned, his smile faltering when his eyes locked on me. His surprise quickly soured into irritation. "Casey," he said, his voice low and tight. "What are you doing here?" I returned his stare with a calm, steady smile. "I came to see you," I said, my voice even but carrying weight. "After all, this gala wouldn't exist without your company's generous donations, right?" Before he could respond, the massive screen behind him flickered to life, bathing the room in bright light. A hush fell as a series of damning images and emails began to play, Ella's correspondence with Adam's rivals, the questionable transactions, the proof of betrayal. The crowd froze, their murmurs dying as the evidence unfolded like a public execution. Adam's face drained of color. His confident facade cracked, and rage twisted his features. What is this?" he stammered, his voice thick with disbelief. I held his gaze, letting him see the steel in mine. "It's not just me you betrayed, Adam. It's our family, and she betrayed you." I watched the realization sink in. His humiliation was a bitter trophy, but it was enough to remind me that I had reclaimed my voice. The video played on, each frame a nail in the coffin of his reputation. Signed contracts bearing Ella's name, unauthorized wire transfers to anonymous accounts, incriminating emails discussing trade secrets with competitors. It was all laid bare for everyone to see. A wave of whispers rippled through the room, a storm of disbelief and judgment. Is this real? How could this happen? Adam's liable, this could ruin him. Adam, the man who once seemed invincible, now looked like a pale shadow of himself. His eyes darted around, searching for an exit, but there was nowhere to hide. Everything he had built was crumbling beneath the weight of betrayal and truth, in full view of those whose admiration he had once reveled in. From across the room, Ella pushed through the crowd, her face wild with panic. She reached him and grabbed his arm. "Adam, it's not what it looks like," she pleaded, her voice trembling. He wrenched his arm away, his face contorted with fury. "Not what it looks like," he hissed. "Then explain how your emails and bank transfers ended up in that presentation. You used me, Ella. You destroyed my company. Ella, always so smug and untouchable, now shrank under the weight of blame and judgment. The people who once admired her looked on in stunned silence. Their public unraveling was complete, and for the first time in years, I felt no fear, only the quiet hum of triumph. Some watched in disbelief, while others wore unmistakable looks of satisfaction as they observed the spectacle unfold before them. From where I stood, I couldn't help but let a small smile curl at the corner of my lips. For the first time, Adam and Ella were tasting the bitter flavor of public humiliation. Slowly but steadily, I walked toward them, each step bolstering my confidence. When I reached their side, I spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Surprised, Adam? This is what happens when ambition and lies consume you. You thought you could use me, control me, and toss me aside. But look, this is your reality." His eyes locked onto mine, a mix of anger and something else flickering beneath the surface. Fear. Yes, it was fear. The kind of fear I had never seen him wear before. He had lost control, and he knew it. "You orchestrated this," he growled, stepping toward me. I stood my ground, meeting his gaze without flinching. "No, Adam. You did this. You betrayed me, our family, and everyone in this room who once trusted you." All I did was ensure the truth came to light. Eager to avoid scandal, business partners began to file out one by one. Ella, desperate to save what little remained of her reputation, slipped away before anyone could corner her with questions. Heather and I exited the venue together, the satisfaction settling in like a calming tide after a storm. The chaos that had unfolded was exactly what Adam deserved. Sitting in the car, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. A woman who no longer bowed to fear, someone I hadn't seen in years. Heather asked what we do next, her smile mischievous and conspiratorial. I took a deep breath and answered, "Adam still has to face the legal consequences. But as for me, I'm ready to start a new life." In the days that followed, the media descended upon the scandal like vultures to a carcass. Headlines blared with words like fraud, betrayal, and a company teetering on the edge of ruin. His reputation was in tatters, a pile of ashes where his empire once stood. Meanwhile, I quietly began building something new for myself. With Heather's support, I launched a business project, drawing from the very skills I had honed during the years I spent helping Adam amass his fortune. But this time, everything I did was for me and my son. One morning, as I reviewed some business contracts, a message from Adam appeared on my phone. "We need to talk. Please." I stared at the screen for a few moments before typing my reply. "There's nothing to discuss. Have your lawyer speak to mine." The last time I saw Adam was in court. His face was etched with exhaustion and defeat, a hollow shell of the arrogant man he once was. The verdict was in my favor. I won full custody of our son and secured a significant settlement. But the greatest victory was reclaiming my freedom. Upon exiting the courtroom, I felt as though I could finally breathe again. Heather was waiting for me outside, and together, we walked into the dawn of a new beginning. While I had lost much, I had gained something of immeasurable value. Myself. The morning after the trial, the sun shone gloriously upon me. As I walked down the street, I felt a sense of lightness I hadn't experienced in years. Adam, and everything he symbolized, no longer weighed me down. I hadn't just gained legal freedom. I had reclaimed emotional independence. When I returned home, I found my son playing in the garden with Heather. His laughter filled the air, and I couldn't stop myself from smiling. I scooped him up in my arms, feeling the warmth of his tiny body against mine. "Mama's here, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay, now." Heather approached with 2 steaming cups of tea, her eyes shining with quiet pride and affection. "Are you ready for your next adventure?" Heather asked with a playful wink. I gazed out at the horizon and nodded slowly. "Absolutely. It's time to build something of my own, something no one can ever take away." Thanks to the divorce settlement, I secured a significant sum of money and a portion of Adam's company assets. I decided to use that capital to start my own business, a consulting firm dedicated to supporting female entrepreneurs. I wanted to be a beacon for women like me, underestimated but unstoppable. The first few months were grueling. Between launching the company, taking care of my son, and adjusting to a new life, I barely had a moment to catch my breath. Yet every small success filled me with pride. Soon, clients began to pour in, and my consulting firm became a hub for women seeking guidance and support. One day, as I was reviewing documents in my office, my assistant stepped in with a curious look. "Miss Casey, someone's here to see you. He says it's important." I furrowed my brows. "Who is it?" Before she could answer, the door opened. Adam walked in. I barely recognized him. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated expression etched across his face. I rose slowly, maintaining my composure. "What are you doing here?" He let out a long sigh and avoided my gaze. "I wanted to see you, to apologize for everything." A wave of emotions swept over me. Shock, disbelief, and, surprisingly, indifference. "Adam, it's too late. Whatever we had is over." He nodded, looking even more shattered. "I know. I've lost everything. Ella's gone. The company is on the brink of bankruptcy." His voice faltered. "I just needed to tell you how sorry I am for the pain I caused you." I studied him for a long moment. Months ago, I might have dreamed of this moment, of seeing him broken and asking for forgiveness. But now, I realized I didn't need his remorse to move forward. "I hope you find your path, Adam. But I've already found mine. Don't contact me again." I pointed toward the door, and he understood. Without another word, he left my office. That night, as I sat at home, reflecting on the encounter, I felt no joy in Adam's downfall, nor did I feel pity. Just nothing. My life no longer revolved around him. It was liberating. I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto the balcony. The city lights sparkled beneath the night sky, and a cool breeze kissed my cheek. Heather joined me, her smile warm and knowing. "I heard you had a visitor today. You okay?" I looked up at the stars and nodded. "Yeah." It was strange, but necessary. "I think I've finally closed that chapter." She raised her glass. "To new beginnings." Our glasses clinked, and as I took a sip, I felt the toast resonate deep within my soul. The following months were filled with growth and fulfillment. The business flourished, and each day brought new opportunities to learn and support other women. My son thrived, healthy, happy, and full of laughter, which remained the most beautiful sound in the world. One day, I received an award at a ceremony honoring influential women in business. Standing on the stage, gazing out at the sea of hopeful, admiring faces, I felt an overwhelming sense of connection and purpose. I stepped up to the microphone and spoke with unwavering confidence. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that we must never underestimate our inner strength. Sometimes, our greatest adversities reveal who we truly are and what we're capable of. This award isn't just mine. It belongs to every woman who dares to dream of a better future and fights to make it real. The applause swelled, filling the room with an energy that was almost tangible. But more than the sound, I felt the unspoken bond between me and everyone in that room. As I descended the stage, Heather waited for me, her eyes shimmering with pride. "I'm so proud of you, Casey. You've accomplished so much." I pulled her into a tight hug. "I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for never giving up on me." She laughed softly. "I always knew you had a warrior inside you. You just needed to remember." With the award in hand, I made my way toward the exit, feeling a profound sense of peace I'd never known before. The past had finally been laid to rest, and the future brimmed with endless possibilities. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my happiness. And this time, I knew no one would ever take it from me again.